The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when the laughter started. Mark stood over her, his eyes cold, while his mother swirled her expensive Chardonnay, smirking at the woman they all believed was a worthless housewife. "Finally," Mark sneered, tossing the pen onto the mahogany table. "Now I can find someone who actually fits into this family. Someone with class. Take your things and get out, Elena. You're nothing without me." He watched her walk out the door, shivering in the rain, convinced he had just discarded a burden. He had no idea that the woman he just kicked to the curb didn't just have class. She owned the very bank that held his family's debt. And the bill? It was about to come due. The chandelier in the Sterling family manor was so bright it almost hurt to look at. It was a monstrosity of crystal and gold, much like the ego of the woman standing beneath it. Beatrice Sterling, the matriarch of the Sterling textile empire. It was her 60th birthday, and the ballroom was filled with the city's elite. Men in Italian suits clinked glasses with women dripping in diamonds, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. In the corner, wearing a simple, off-the-rack beige dress that had seen better days, stood Eleanor. She clutched a small, wrapped box in her hands, her knuckles white. She looked out of place, a sparrow in a room full of peacocks. "Look at her," a voice whispered nearby. Elena didn't need to turn around to know it was Chloe, her sister-in-law. "She looks like the help. I honestly don't know why Mark brought her." "Charity, darling," another voice tittered. "Mark is just too kind for his own good." Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. For 3 years she had endured this. 3 years of being the invisible wife, the mistake Mark Sterling had made during a rebellious phase. Mark, the golden boy, the CEO of Sterling Textiles, had married her, a quiet librarian he met at a coffee shop, and his family never let him forget how far beneath him she was. Mark appeared through the crowd, holding a glass of scotch. He looked impeccable, handsome in a way that used to make Eleanor's heart race. Now it just made her stomach churn. He didn't smile at her. He scanned her simple dress with a look of distaste. "You're standing in the shadows again, Eleanor," Mark said, his voice low but sharp. "It's embarrassing. Go mingle. Try to act like you belong here, even if we both know you don't." I have a gift for your mother," Eleanor said softly, holding up the box. Mark scoffed. "A gift? What did you buy it with?" "The allowance I give you. Please, Eleanor, don't humiliate me by giving her something cheap in front of the senator." "It's not cheap," Eleanor insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "It's meaningful." Mark rolled his eyes and walked away, leaving her alone again. The music stopped, and the room fell silent. Beatrice Sterling tapped a spoon against her champagne flute, demanding attention. She stood on a raised platform, basking in the adoration of the room. "Thank you all," Beatrice cooed. "It is truly a blessing to be surrounded by such success, such beauty, and such quality people." Her eyes flickered toward Elena for a brief, cruel second before moving on. "Now, let's see what my wonderful children have brought me." Chloe stepped up first, presenting a set of keys to a brand new Porsche. The room gasped. Beatrice squealed with delight. Next was Mark, who presented a deed to a vacation villa in Tuscany. The applause was thunderous. Then, Beatrice's eyes landed on Eleanor. A hush fell over the room. It was the kind of silence that precedes a public execution. "And you, Eleanor?" Beatrice asked, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "What have you contributed? Did you knit me a scarf?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Eleanor stepped forward, her legs feeling like lead. She handed the small box to Beatrice. Beatrice opened it with 2 fingers, as if handling something dirty. She pulled out a vintage, leather-bound book. It was a first edition of Pride and Prejudice, rare and incredibly difficult to find. Elena had spent months tracking it down, using connections she had never revealed to Mark. Beatrice looked at the book, then looked at Elena. She laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A used book," Beatrice announced to the room, holding it up like a piece of trash. "My daughter-in-law gives me a dirty used book for my 60th birthday." The room erupted in laughter. Mark stepped forward, his face red with fury. He snatched the book from his mother's hand and threw it onto the floor. The sound of the binding hitting the marble echoed like a gunshot. "You are unbelievable," Mark hissed at Elena, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I give my mother a villa, and you bring her trash. You are a stain on this family, Elena. A pathetic, freeloading stain." Elena looked down at the book. She didn't cry. She had cried enough over the last 3 years. Something inside her, a steel beam that had been bending for a long time, finally snapped back into place. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mark," Elena said. Her voice was different. The stutter was gone. The timidity had evaporated. "I don't just feel that way," Mark shouted, playing to the audience now. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He slapped it against his palm. "I've been waiting for the right time, and frankly, I can't stand another second of looking at you. These are divorce papers, Elena." The crowd gasped, then murmured in excitement. It was the drama they craved. "Sign them," Mark demanded, thrusting the papers at her. "Sign them and get out. You get nothing. No alimony, no house, nothing. Just leave." Elena looked at the papers. She looked at Mark, whose face was twisted in arrogance. She looked at Beatrice, who was smiling triumphantly. "You want me to sign them now?" Elena asked calmly. "Here. Yes, right now," Mark yelled. "Let everyone see me cut the dead weight loose." Elena took a pen from a nearby waiter. She didn't hesitate. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She flipped to the last page and signed her name with a flourish. Elena Vance. She dropped the sterling immediately. She handed the papers back to Mark. "Done," she said. Mark blinked, surprised by her lack of resistance. He expected tears. He expected a scene. "Good," he stammered, trying to regain his composure. "Now get out, and don't expect a ride. You can walk." Elena turned to Beatrice. "Happy birthday, Beatrice. That book is worth $40,000. But I suppose you wouldn't know value if it wasn't flashy." She turned and walked toward the grand double doors. The crowd parted for her, not out of respect, but out of confusion. She held her head high, her silhouette framed by the golden light of the hallway. Mark laughed nervously behind her. "She's crazy. 40,000. It's garbage. Good riddance." As Eleanor pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped into the cool night air, she didn't look back. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of rain and pine. She reached into her clutch, which Mark had always mocked as being from a thrift store, and pulled out a phone. Not the cracked iPhone Mark allowed her to have, but a sleek, black satellite phone. She dialed a single number. "This is Eleanor," she said, her voice dropping an octave, commanding and cold. "It's done. Come get me." The rain was falling in sheets as Eleanor stood at the bottom of the long driveway of the Sterling estate. She was soaked within seconds, her beige dress clinging to her frame, but she didn't shiver. The fire burning inside her was too hot. Mark thought he had destroyed her. He thought he had stripped her of her dignity and left her with nothing. He had no idea that for the past 3 years, Eleanor had been playing a role. She wasn't just a librarian. She was Eleanor Vance, the founder and majority shareholder of Vantage Global, a private equity firm that silently controlled massive sectors of the tech and shipping industries. She was worth approximately $4.2 billion, She had met Mark 3 years ago when she was recovering from a hostile takeover attempt and needed a break from her chaotic life. She had wanted to be loved for herself, not her money. So she hid it. She became simple Eleanor. She fell in love with Mark, or at least the version of himself he showed her in the beginning. But money reveals character, and the Sterling family's obsession with status had slowly revealed the rot at their core. She had given him 3 years. 3 years to show kindness. 3 years to defend her. He had failed every single day. 2 headlights cut through the darkness, blindingly bright. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom extended wheelbase glided silently down the road, ignoring the puddles. It pulled up smoothly beside her. The driver's door opened, and a man in an immaculate suit stepped out, holding a large umbrella. It was James, her head of security and most trusted confidant. "Miss Vance," James said, shielding her from the rain. His face was a mask of professional concern, but his eyes showed fury at her condition. "Shall I have the gate security removed on our way out?" "No, James," Elena said, sliding into the back seat where the leather was warm and the air smelled of expensive cedar. "Let them have their night. The hangover is coming soon enough." Inside the car, waiting for her, was Sarah, her chief of staff. Sarah immediately handed Elena a tablet and a plush cashmere robe. "Change, please," Sarah said, her voice tight. "I hate seeing you in that rag." Elena stripped off the wet beige dress and wrapped herself in the robe. She took a sip of the sparkling water Sarah offered. "What is the status of the acquisition?" Sarah tapped on her own tablet. "The board of Sterling Textiles is currently in a panic. Their stock dropped 14% today after the rumors of the factory recall in Vietnam surfaced. They are desperate for liquidity. They have a meeting scheduled with Vantage Global Acquisitions team next Tuesday. They think they are meeting a junior VP to beg for a loan." Elena smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a shark's smile. "Change the meeting. Move it to tomorrow morning. And tell them the CEO will be handling it personally." Sarah's eyes widened. "You want to reveal yourself tomorrow? So soon?" "Why wait?" Elena looked out the window as the car sped away from the Sterling estate. "Mark divorced his wife tonight. Tomorrow, he meets his creditor." The next morning, the Sterling household was nursing a collective hangover. The ballroom was a mess of confetti and empty champagne bottles. Beatrice sat at the breakfast table, massaging her temples. "Is she gone?" Beatrice asked, not bothering to look up. Mark buttered his toast aggressively. "Yes. Security said a car picked her up at the end of the driveway. Probably an Uber she couldn't afford." "Good riddance." "We need to focus, Mark," his father, Richard Sterling, said. Richard was a quiet man, mostly because Beatrice and Mark never let him speak. But today he looked pale. "The financial report came in this morning. It's bad. The recall is going to cost us $50 million. We don't have the cash reserves." "Relax, Dad," Mark scoffed. "We have the meeting with Vantage Global next week. They lend to everyone. I'll charm them. We'll get the capital, and we'll bounce back. We always do." "They moved the meeting," Richard said, his hands shaking slightly. "They called at 6:30 a.m. They want us there today, in 2 hours. "Today?" Mark frowned. "That's aggressive, but fine. Shows they're interested. Who are we meeting? That VP, Smith?" Richard swallowed hard. "No. The email said the CEO is handling it personally." Mark whistled. "The CIO of Vantage. No one even knows who that is. They're like a ghost. This is huge, Dad. If the CEO is taking the meeting, they must see massive potential in us. They probably want to partner, not just lend." Mark stood up, adjusting his silk tie. "This is it. I got rid of the dead weight last night, and today I secure the future of the company. Everything is coming up, Sterling." 2 hours later, Mark and Richard stood in the lobby of the Vantage Global headquarters. It was a skyscraper of glass and steel that pierced the clouds in the financial district. Everything about it screamed power. The silence in the lobby was intimidating. "Mr. Sterling," a sharp-looking assistant approached them. "The CEO is ready for you now. Top floor." Mark smirked at his father. "Top floor. See? VIP treatment." They took the private elevator up. Mark checked his reflection in the mirrored walls. "I look good. Beatrice will be thrilled when I tell her we secured the deal." The elevator doors opened directly into a massive boardroom. One entire wall was glass, overlooking the city. At the far end of the long obsidian table sat a high-backed leather chair, turned away from them, facing the view. Sarah, the woman Mark didn't recognize, stood by the table. "Gentlemen, please, sit." Mark and Richard sat. Mark leaned back, oozing confidence. "So, let's get down to business. We're happy to be here. We know Vantage is looking for solid investments, and Sterling Textiles is a legacy brand." The chair slowly began to swivel. "Legacy is a strong word, Mark," a voice said. Mark froze. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. That voice! It was impossible. It sounded like her, but colder, sharper. The chair finished turning. Sitting there, wearing a sharp, white-tailored suit that cost more than Mark's car, with her hair slicked back and diamonds glistening at her throat, was Eleanor. She wasn't the cowering housewife in the beige dress. She was a queen on her throne. Her eyes locked onto Mark's, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Elena," Mark stammered, half rising from his chair. What are you doing here? Did you get a job as a secretary?" Elena didn't blink. She pressed a button on the intercom. "Security. If Mr. Sterling speaks out of turn again, remove him." She folded her hands on the table. "You aren't here to meet a secretary, Mark. You are here to meet the owner of Vantage Global. You are here to meet the person who owns your debt." Richard Sterling turned ash-white. You are the CEO." "Surprise," Elena said dryly. "Now let's look at your financials. They are, much like your son's character, completely bankrupt." Mark sank back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The realization hit him like a freight train. The woman he had kicked out into the rain less than 12 hours ago held his entire life in her hands, and she didn't look like she was in a forgiving mood. The silence in the boardroom was heavy, suffocating. It felt less like a meeting and more like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Mark was gripping the armrests of his leather chair so tightly his knuckles were turning white. He stared at Elena, searching for a trace of the woman who used to make him coffee in the morning, the woman who would fold his laundry while he complained about his stressful days. That woman was gone. In her place sat a titan of industry, looking at him with the dispassionate gaze of a surgeon preparing to cut. "This is a joke, right?" Mark let out a breathless, incredulous laugh. He looked at his father, then back at Elena. "You hired actors? Or you slept your way to the top. There is no way you own Vantage." Elena didn't even flinch. She simply tapped a finger on the file in front of her. "Sarah, please show Mr. Sterling the capitalization table." Sarah slid a document across the obsidian table. Richard Sterling picked it up, his hands trembling. He adjusted his spectacles, reading the lines. His face, already pale, turned a sickly shade of grey. "It's true," Richard whispered, his voice cracking. "Elena Vance, 85% majority shareholder. Founded 6 years ago." He looked up at his son, horror in his eyes. "Mark, she's not just the CEO. She is Vantage." Mark felt the room spin. 6 years ago, But we met 3 years ago. You were rich the whole time? Wealthy, Mark. Rich is what you pretend to be, Elena corrected him coldly. And yes, I was recovering from the stress of building this empire when I met you. I wanted simplicity. I wanted to see if a man could love me without the billions attached to my name. I got my answer last night, didn't I? I didn't know, Mark stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. If I had known, things would have been different. Mum would have treated you like a queen. I would have— You would have what? Elena cut him off, her voice sharp as a whip. Loved me? Or loved my bank account? You just admitted that your affection has a price tag, and frankly, Mark, I can't afford you. You're a bad investment. She opened the folder in front of her. Now, to business. Sterling Textiles is bleeding money. You've ignored market trends. You've overspent on executive bonuses, specifically yours, Mark, and this recall in Vietnam is the nail in the coffin. You owe Vantage Global $150 million in operational loans. Loans that are callable immediately due to the breach of contract regarding the quality control scandal. Richard slumped in his chair. Ms. Vance, Elena, please. If you call those loans, we go bankrupt. The family legacy, everything will be wiped out. We have assets. You have mortgaged assets, Elena countered. I own the debt on the factories. I own the debt on the warehouse. And as of this morning, I bought the debt on your family estate. Mark shot up from his chair. You bought the house. You can't do that. I can, and I did. The bank was all too happy to offload a high-risk mortgage, Elena said calmly. Sit down, Mark, before security makes you sit. Mark slowly lowered himself back down, looking like a beaten dog. Here is the offer, Elena said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. Vantage Global absorbs Sterling Textiles. We take over all operations, all assets, and all liabilities. The Sterling family is removed from the board and management immediately. And what do we get? Mark asked, his voice returning to a whine. You get to walk away without filing for personal bankruptcy. You get to keep your personal vehicles, provided they are fully paid off. And I will give you a severance package of $500,000. 500,000! Mark screamed. That's nothing. That won't even cover my lifestyle for a year. The company is worth millions. The company is worth negative 50 million, Elena said, her eyes narrowing. The only reason it's still floating is because I kept it floating. Did you really think those anonymous angel investors who bailed you out 2 years ago were real? That was me, Mark. I was using my private funds to cover your incompetence because I was your wife. But I'm not your wife anymore. The charity stops today. The revelation hit Mark like a physical blow. He sat back, mouth agape. All his success, all his brilliant saves in the last few years. It was her. It was always her. He had been strutting around like a peacock while the boring librarian at home was quietly writing the checks that kept the lights on. You tricked me, Mark whispered, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. I loved you, Elena said, and for a second her voice softened, showing the pain beneath the armor. But you killed that love, Mark. You and your mother suffocated it until it died. She stood up, signaling the meeting was over. You have 24 hours to sign the acquisition deal. If you don't, I call the loans, I foreclose on the estate, and I sue the board for gross negligence. You'll end up in prison for the financial irregularities my team found in your expense reports. Embezzlement is a serious crime, Mark. Mark went white. He knew exactly what expenses she was talking about. The jewelry for his mistresses, the gambling debts, disguised as consulting fees. We'll sign, Richard said quickly, his voice defeated. "We'll sign, Elena, just please don't release the audit." "Smart choice," Elena said. She didn't offer a handshake. "Sarah will see you out. And Mark, don't forget to take your things out of the house. I'm having the locks changed on Friday." As Mark and Richard walked out of the office, passing the rows of employees who worked for the woman they had scorned, Mark felt a sensation he had never felt before. He felt small, microscopic. "Dad," Mark whispered as the elevator doors closed. "What do we tell Mum?" Richard looked at his son with a mix of anger and despair. "We tell her that the girl she called trash just bought us." The fallout was instantaneous, though private for the first few hours. When Mark and Richard arrived back at the Sterling Manor, Beatrice was in the middle of a fitting for her dress for the upcoming Metropolitan Charity Gala, the biggest social event of the season. She stood on a pedestal, a glass of champagne in hand. "Mark, did you get the money? Did you charm the pants off the CEO?" Richard walked past her, collapsing onto a sofa and burying his head in his hands. Mark stood in the doorway, looking like a ghost. "Well," Beatrice snapped, "don't just stand there. Tell me we're rich again." "We're not," Mark said hollowly. "We're done, Mum. We lost the company." Beatrice froze. "What do you mean, lost? Did they refuse the loan?" "We sold it," Mark said, his voice trembling, "to avoid prison, to avoid bankruptcy." "Sold it!" Beatrice shrieked, stepping off the pedestal and ignoring the seamstress. "To whom?" "Who dared to take my company?" "Vantage Global," Richard mumbled into his hands. "And guess who the CEO is?" Mark said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. "Guess who sat in that chair and looked down on us like we were insects?" Beatrice narrowed her eyes. "Who?" "Elena." The glass of champagne slipped from Beatrice's fingers and shattered on the floor. "Though, the librarian? Your ex-wife?" "She's a billionaire, Mom," Mark shouted, finally losing it. "She owns Vantage. She's been paying our bills for 2 years. The trash you threw out last night is worth more than this entire neighborhood combined." Beatrice staggered back, clutching her pearls. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. The memory of the book, the first edition, Pride and Prejudice, flashed in her mind. That book is worth $40,000. She had laughed. She had called it garbage. "No!" Beatrice hissed, denial setting in. "She's lying. She's a fraud. She must have stolen it. We have to fight this." "We can't fight," Richard yelled, standing up. "She has proof of Mark's embezzlement. She has us by the throat. It's over, Beatrice. We have to sign the papers or Mark goes to jail." The house fell silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. "The gala," Beatrice whispered suddenly, her eyes gleaming with a frantic, delusional light. "Tonight is the gala. Everyone will be there. The mayor, the senator, the press. If she's really the CEO, she'll be there." "So?" Mark asked. "So we go," Beatrice said, straightening her back. "We go and we expose her. We tell everyone she manipulated us. We play the victims. We tell them she married you under false pretenses to steal the family company. The press loves a scandal. If we ruin her reputation, maybe we can void the deal." "Mum, that's crazy," Mark said, but a flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. He was desperate. He couldn't accept defeat. "Do you think it could work?" "I am Beatrice Sterling," she declared, stepping over the broken glass. "I can make anyone believe anything. Go put on your tuxedo. We're going to war." The Metropolitan Charity Gala was a sea of flashing cameras and velvet ropes. It was the night where the city's power players came to preen. The ballroom was even more opulent than the Sterlings, draped in silk and filled with the scent of expensive lilies. Elena Vance arrived late. She stepped out of her limousine, and the air seemed to leave the lungs of the paparazzi. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her figure, adorned with sapphires that matched her eyes. It was a revenge dress to end all revenge dresses. On her arm was not a date, but Julian Thorne, the notoriously handsome and ruthless CEO of Thorne Tech. He was Mark's biggest rival in the business world, a man Mark had always tried to emulate but failed. "Ready to break the internet?" Julian whispered to her, offering his arm. "Let's just get through the appetizers first." Elena smirked. They walked the red carpet, the cameras flashing like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. "Ms. Vance, is it true Vantage is acquiring a textile firm?" "Ms. Vance, who are you wearing?" Inside, the room buzzed. Elena moved through the crowd with grace, shaking hands with senators and bankers who treated her with deferential respect. She was in her element. She wasn't the shy wife in the corner anymore. She was the sun everyone orbited around. Suddenly the crowd near the entrance parted. Beatrice, Mark, and Richard Sterling marched in. They held their heads high, but their eyes were wild. They hadn't been invited. Their invitation had been revoked that morning, but Beatrice had bullied past the check-in girl. Beatrice spotted Eleanor across the room, laughing with Julian Thorne. The sight of her son's rival with her ex-daughter-in-law made Beatrice's blood boil. "There she is," Beatrice announced loudly, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter. The room quieted. Beatrice marched toward Elena, Mark trailing behind her like a sulky teenager. "Elena!" Beatrice cried out, putting on a performance. "How dare you show your face here after what you did?" Elena turned slowly, her expression bored. Julian stepped slightly in front of her, protective, but Eleanor touched his arm to stop him. "Beatrice, I believe you're trespassing. I don't recall seeing your name on the guest list." "Don't play coy with me," Beatrice shouted, drawing the attention of every camera in the room. "You are a fraud. You married my son to spy on our company. You stole our legacy. You're nothing but a con artist." The crowd gasped. Phones were raised, recording the scene. Elena laughed. It was a soft, genuine laugh. "Stole your legacy. Beatrice, your legacy was debt and bad fashion choices. I bought your company to save the jobs of the 2,000 workers you were about to fire." "Liar!" Mark stepped forward, finding his courage. "You lied to me for 3 years. You pretended to be poor. That's entrapment." "It's called privacy, Mark," Elena said coolly. "Something you clearly don't understand." She signaled to the DJ booth. The music cut out completely. Someone handed Elena a microphone. "Since the Sterlings have decided to make this a public forum," Elena's voice boomed over the speakers, "I might as well make the announcement now." She looked at the crowd, then back at Mark, whose face was crumpling. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena addressed the room, "I am pleased to announce that as of 5 p.m. today, Vantage Global has acquired Sterling Textiles." Applause started, then faltered as people watched the drama unfold. "However," Elena continued, "we are not keeping the management. The Sterling family has been relieved of their duties, effective immediately due to gross financial negligence and—" She paused, looking directly at Mark. "Unethical conduct." "You can't do this!" Beatrice screamed, lunging forward. 2 massive security guards intercepted her. "Furthermore," Elena said, her voice turning to steel, "I want to clarify a personal rumor. Mr. Sterling and I are divorced, not because I was a burden, as he so fondly told his friends, but because I refuse to continue bankrolling a man who treats his wife like an accessory and his employees like serfs." She turned to Mark. "The money is gone, Mark. The prestige is gone. And now, everyone knows exactly who you are. A man who had $1 billion diamond in his hand and threw it away because he wanted a shiny piece of glass." The room erupted, not in applause, but in whispers and shock. The humiliation was total. It was public. It was being live-streamed to millions. Mark looked around. He saw the sneers of the people he tried to impress. He saw Julian Thorne looking at him with pity. He saw his mother being restrained by security, looking like a madwoman. "Elena," Mark whispered, reaching out. "Please." Elena handed the microphone back. She took Julian's arm. "Get them out of my sight," she said to the guards. As security dragged the screaming Beatrice and the sobbing Mark out of the gala, Elena didn't look back. She turned to Julian. "Now," she said, taking a champagne flute. "I believe I promised you a dance." 3 months had passed since the night of the gala, but for Mark Sterling, it felt like 3 lifetimes. The fall from grace hadn't been a slide. It had been a cliff dive. The severance package Eleanor had graciously given them, $500,000, had evaporated almost instantly. Beatrice, refusing to accept their new reality, had spent nearly half of it in the first month trying to maintain appearances. She rented a penthouse she couldn't afford, leased a luxury car she didn't need, and threw throwaway dinner parties for friends who drank her wine and then ghosted her the moment the check bounced. Now, the penthouse was gone. The cars were repossessed. The friends were pretending they had never met the Sterlings. Mark stood in the freezing drizzle outside the Gilded Lily, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. He wasn't dining there. He was wearing a maroon vest that was too tight around the shoulders, waiting for a sleek Ferrari to pull up. Mark was a valet. "Hurry up, buddy. I'm starving," a man in a sharp suit barked, tossing his keys at Mark. Mark fumbled to catch them, his face burning with humiliation. He looked up and froze. The man was Greg Henderson, his former fraternity brother and best friend. Greg used to be the one asking Mark for loans. Greg squinted, peering through the rain. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. No way. Mark? Mark Sterling? Mark wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. He pulled the cap of his uniform down lower. "Just doing a favor for a friend, Greg." Greg laughed, a loud, barking sound that drew stares. "A favor? You're parking cars, man. I heard you guys lost everything, but I didn't think it was this bad. Valet? Seriously?" "Just give me the keys, Greg," Mark snapped, his patience fraying. "Easy there, Parker," Greg sneered, using a derogatory nickname. "Don't scratch it. It costs more than your life." He turned to the blonde woman on his arm. "You believe this? This guy used to act like he owned the city. Now he's parking my car." Mark got into the Ferrari, his hands shaking so hard he could barely grip the steering wheel. The smell of the rich leather interior triggered a visceral memory of his old life. He parked the car in the back lot, turned off the engine, and just screamed. He screamed until his throat was raw, pounding the steering wheel. When his shift ended, he walked to the bus stop. He didn't have a car anymore. He took the number 42 bus to the outskirts of the city, to a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered, and the sirens were a constant lullaby. He walked up 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. The paint was peeling, and the hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. He unlocked the door and was immediately hit by a wall of heat. Beatrice had the radiator cranked up to the maximum. She was sitting on a stained floral sofa they had bought from a thrift store, wearing a silk robe that was fraying at the hem. She was surrounded by lottery tickets. "You're late," Beatrice said, not looking up from her scratching. "Did you bring wine?" "I brought instant noodles, Mum," Mark said, dropping a plastic bag on the wobbly table. "And rent is due in 2 days. We're short." "Don't bore me with details," Beatrice scoffed. "I have a feeling about this ticket. It's a winner. I can feel it." Mark looked at his mother. The once terrifying matriarch of the Sterling Empire had been reduced to a gambling addict, in a dilapidated apartment. It was pathetic. "Mum, stop," Mark said, his voice tired. "It's over. We're not winning the lottery. You need to get a job. The reception desk at the dental office called again. They said you didn't show up for the interview." "A receptionist?" Beatrice looked at him with sheer horror. "Me? Answer phones. I am a sterling, Mark. I do not answer phones." "You're not a sterling anymore," Mark shouted, the stress finally boiling over. "You're Beatrice Vance." Dad went back to using his middle name and moved to Florida to live in a trailer because he couldn't stand looking at you. "We have nothing because of you." Beatrice stood up, her eyes flashing with that old, manic fire. "Because of me? You're the one who married her. You're the one who brought that snake into our house. If you had just been a better husband, maybe she wouldn't have stolen everything." "I was doing what you told me to do," Mark yelled back. "You told me to treat her like trash. You told me she was beneath us." "And she was," Beatrice shrieked. "She tricked us." Mark stormed into his small bedroom and slammed the door. He sat on the lumpy mattress, burying his face in his hands. He looked around the room. It was filled with boxes he still hadn't unpacked, the remnants of his old life. He kicked a box in frustration. It tipped over, spilling old clothes and papers onto the floor. Among the debris was an old jacket of Eleanor's, a simple, grey wool coat she used to wear when they went for walks in the park. Mark stared at it. He remembered how he used to make fun of it, calling it drab. He picked it up. It still smelled faintly of her, vanilla and old books. He felt something crinkle in the pocket. Mark reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was heavy, expensive stationery. He unfolded it. It was handwriting he recognized immediately. Elena's elegant script. It was dated the day of the birthday party. The day he divorced her. "My dearest Mark, I know things have been difficult lately. I know your mother puts pressure on you, and I know I haven't been the easiest person to understand. I've been keeping a secret from you, not to hurt you, but to protect the purity of what we have. But today, on Beatrice's birthday, I want to end the secrets. I want to start our lives for real." Enclosed in the safe deposit box, key attached, is a check for $50 million. It is enough to clear the family debt and fix the factory issues. I sold a small portion of my shares in my company, Vantage, to do this for you. I want you to be free, Mark. I want us to be partners. I love you. Please, let's start over tonight. Yours, Elena. Mark read the letter. Then he read it again. He felt the blood drain from his face. His hands went numb. She wasn't just planning to reveal herself. She was planning to save them. She was going to give them $50 million as a gift, just to make him happy. Just to make his mother stop hating her. If he had just waited. If he hadn't thrown the divorce papers at her. If he hadn't let his mother mock that book. He would be a billionaire's husband right now. He would be safe. He would be loved. No, Mark whispered, a sound of pure animal agony escaping his throat. No, no, no. He crumpled the letter to his chest and curled into a ball on the dirty floor. He sobbed. He cried not just for the money, but for the realization of how truly evil he had been. He had taken a woman who was willing to sacrifice millions for his happiness and treated her like a parasite. The realization broke something inside him, but it also planted a seed of desperate, delusional hope. She loved me, he thought, wiping his eyes. She wrote this that day. The feelings can't just be gone. She's angry. She's punishing me. But if I show her I've changed, if I show her this letter and tell her I found it, maybe she'll remember. He stood up. He looked in the cracked mirror. His eyes were red, his face unshaven. "I have to see her," Mark said to his reflection. "I have to fix this." The Vantage Global headquarters had been renovated. It was even more imposing than before, a monolith of glass reflecting the city skyline. Mark stood outside the revolving doors, wearing his only remaining suit. It was wrinkled, and there was a small stain on the lapel he couldn't get out, but he had slicked back his hair and tried to channel the old Mark Sterling confidence. It felt brittle, like a mask made of eggshells. He had called the office 20 times, blocked. He had emailed, bounced. This was his last resort. He waited for 3 hours. Security guards eyed him suspiciously, but since he was on the public sidewalk, they didn't move him. Finally, at noon, the automatic doors slid open. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. Elena walked out. She looked radiant. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit, sunglasses, and she was talking to Sarah and a tall man Mark recognized immediately, Julian Thorne. Julian was laughing at something she said, his hand resting comfortably, intimately, on the small of her back. Mark felt a spike of jealousy so sharp it nearly doubled him over. He pushed off the wall and ran toward them. "Elena!" Security moved instantly. 2 large men stepped in his path, creating a human wall. "Elena, please, just 1 minute," Mark shouted, trying to peer around the guards. "I found the letter in your coat." Elena stopped. She turned slowly, lifting her sunglasses. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't hateful. It was worse. It was indifferent. She said something to Julian, who frowned, but nodded. She motioned for the guards to step aside. Mark stumbled forward, breathless. He stood 5 feet from her, but the distance felt like miles. "You have 2 minutes, Mark," Elena said, checking her watch. "I have a lunch reservation." "Elena," Mark panted, pulling the crumpled letter from his pocket. "I found this. In your grey coat, I didn't know. You were going to pay the debt. You were going to save us." "I was," Elena said simply. "I'm so sorry," Mark said, his voice cracking. "I was an idiot. I was blind. I let my mother poison me against you. But reading this, I remembered how much we loved each other. I know you still feel it. You can't just turn off love like a light switch." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "Give me another chance. Not for the money. I don't care about the money. I'll sign a prenup. I just want you. I want my wife back. We can start over, just like you wrote in the letter." Elena looked at the letter in his hand, then up at his desperate, unshaven face. She sighed, a sound of deep exhaustion. "Mark," she said softly, "you don't miss me. You miss the safety net I provided. You miss the idea of someone fixing your mistakes." "That's not true. I love you." "Do you?" Elena asked. "Do you know what my favorite color is?" Mark blinked. "What?" "My favorite color. We were married for 3 years." "What is it?" Mark stammered. It's blue? You wore that blue dress." "It's green," Elena said. "Sage green. I told you on our first date. I painted our bedroom wall that color, and you made me paint over it because you said it looked cheap." Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Do you know the name of the town I grew up in?" Elena continued, her voice calm but relentless. "Do you know my middle name? Do you know why I have a scar on my left knee?" Mark looked down at his shoes. He didn't know. He realized with a sickening thud that he didn't know anything about her. He had spent 3 years talking about himself. "You fell in love with a mirror, Mark," Elena said. "You loved that I listened to you. You loved that I supported you. But you never saw me. And that letter?" She pointed to the paper in his hand. That wasn't a promise of a future. It was a suicide note for my dignity. I was willing to buy your love because I didn't think I deserved to be loved for free. Thank God you rejected me that night. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Don't say that, Mark whispered. Please. I'm marrying Julian in the spring, Elena said. The world stopped. Mark looked at Julian, who was watching them with a protective, stony gaze. He knows my middle name, Elena said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips as she glanced at Julian. He knows my favorite color, and he didn't need my money to respect me. She put her sunglasses back on. Go home, Mark. Burn the letter. It's from a ghost. She turned and walked away. Julian placed a hand on her back, guiding her into the waiting limousine. Mark stood on the pavement, watching the car pull away. He was alone. Truly. Finally alone. He didn't have the energy to scream this time. He just felt cold. He turned to walk back to the bus stop, but his phone buzzed. It was a call from a number he didn't recognize. Hello? Mark answered dully. Is this Mark Sterling? A harsh voice asked. Yes. This is the 5th precinct. We have your mother, Beatrice Sterling, in custody. Mark closed his eyes. What did she do? She was caught attempting to pass a bad check at a jewelry store. When the officers arrived, she assaulted an officer and resisted arrest. She's claiming she owns the store. You need to come down here. Mark let out a laugh, a dry, rattling sound. No, Mark said. Excuse me, sir? No, Mark repeated, his voice gaining a strange, dark strength. I don't need to come down there. I can't make bail. I don't have any money, and frankly, she's not my problem anymore. Sir, she's your mother. She's a stranger, Mark said. Tell her I'm busy parking cars. He hung up the phone. He looked at the crumpled letter in his hand one last time, then dropped it into a nearby trash can. He began the long walk to the bus stop. The rain started again, cold and grey, washing away the last of the Sterling legacy. 5 years had passed since the doors of Vantage Global spun shut behind Mark Sterling. The city had changed, as cities do. Skylines rose, businesses folded, and names on the social register cycled out like seasons. In the high-stakes world of finance and high society, the name Sterling had been completely erased, scrubbed away like a stain on a marble floor. In a small, quiet suburb on the other side of the state, Mark sat in a modest diner, nursing a cup of black coffee. He was 35 now, but he looked older. The arrogance that had once defined his posture was gone, replaced by a permanent slump of resignation. He wore a blue polo shirt with a name tag that read, Manager. He ran a mid-sized auto parts store now. It was honest work. It paid the rent on his one-bedroom apartment. It was a life. It just wasn't the life he was supposed to have. Above the counter, a small television was playing the midday news. Mark usually ignored it, staring into his coffee or checking inventory lists on his phone. But today, a familiar name drifted through the static. And in business news, billionaire philanthropist Elena Vance Thorne has just cut the ribbon on the new City Central Library, a project fully funded by her charitable trust. Mark's head snapped up. There she was. On the screen, Elena looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her. She wasn't wearing the beige dress of a timid housewife, nor the sharp suit of a corporate shark. She wore a soft, sage-green dress, her favorite color. She was smiling, holding a giant pair of scissors. Next to her stood Julian Thorne, looking at her with an adoration that Mark had never been capable of. And in Julian's arms was a toddler, a little girl with curly hair and Elena's bright, intelligent eyes. The camera zoomed in as Elena spoke into the microphones. This library is dedicated to everyone who was ever told their dreams were too small, Elena said, her voice clear and strong. It is dedicated to the idea that true value isn't found in bank accounts, but in the stories we write for ourselves. Never let anyone treat you like a used book. You are a first edition. Mark felt a physical ache in his chest, a hollowness that expanded until it made it hard to breathe. He remembered the book, the copy of Pride and Prejudice. He remembered his mother's laugh. He remembered his own sneer. You are a first edition. He looked down at his table. He was surrounded by empty sugar packets and a cold cup of coffee. He thought about his mother, Beatrice. She was currently in a state-run assisted living facility, her mind lost to dementia. On her good days, she stared out the window. On her bad days, she screamed at the nurses, demanding they bring her champagne and calling for servants who had been gone for half a decade. She had died inside the day the money ran out. Mark had visited her once, a year ago. She hadn't recognized him. She had asked the nice man to tell her son, the CEO, to come pick her up in the Rolls-Royce. Mark had walked out and never went back. "Hey, Mark," the waitress called out, refilling his cup. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Mark looked back at the TV screen. Elena was laughing now, hugging her husband and child. She looked free. She looked complete. She didn't look like a woman who harbored hatred or sought revenge. She had simply moved on, ascending to a plane of existence where Mark Sterling was nothing more than a faint, unpleasant memory. "Yeah," Mark said, his voice raspy. "I'm okay. Just used to know someone who looked like her." "Must be nice to have that kind of money," the waitress sighed, watching the screen. "I bet she never had a bad day in her life." Mark smiled, a sad, crooked thing. "I bet she had plenty. She just knew how to survive them." He stood up and placed a $5 bill on the table. It was a good tip for a coffee. He wasn't rich, but he had learned the value of kindness the hard way. He walked out of the diner and into the autumn chill. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward his used sedan. He had a shift to finish. He had inventory to count. He had a quiet, lonely life to live. As he started the car, he looked in the rearview mirror. He saw a man who had held the world in his hands and dropped it because he was too busy looking at himself. He put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the image of Eleanor Vance Thorne on the TV screen behind him, shining bright and unreachable, a diamond he had mistaken for dust. And that is the story of Mark and Elena. It's a harsh reminder that when you marry someone, you marry their heart, not their wallet. Mark and his family were so obsessed with status and appearance that they failed to see the incredible value of the woman standing right in front of them. They thought they were discarding a burden, but they were actually throwing away their lottery ticket. Elena's success wasn't just about the billions she owned. It was about the dignity she reclaimed. She proved that the best revenge isn't anger, it's happiness. It's moving on and thriving while the people who mistreated you are left with nothing but their regrets. What do you think? Did Mark deserve a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories every week. Thanks for watching.